What's up, guys? It's MB Boxing. I just finished up watching Vergil Ortiz Jr. versus Michael McKinson, and this was a 12-rounder in the welterweight division, and it was for the WBA welterweight world title eliminator. And this fight was Saturday, August 6th, from Dickies Arena in Fort Worth, Texas, and this fight was broadcasted on DAZN. And in this fight, Vergil Ortiz Jr. was able to get a 9th round knockout victory over Michael McKinson. So this was actually a very solid performance from Vergil Ortiz Jr. Leading up to the stoppage, I had this bout scored 79-72 in favor of Vergil Ortiz Jr. He was winning this fight pretty easily, considering Michael McKinson just couldn't have enough on his punches to keep Ortiz off him. But yeah, just to break this fight down, in round one, McKinson was actually clipped with some decent right hands, and his legs were a bit buckled and shaken in the first round. I don't know, I just noted that down as something that was sort of big, and that's why I did give the first round to Vergil Ortiz Jr. But then in round number 3, it was a big round for Ortiz Jr. He was able to walk down McKinson a lot, and really throughout the entire fight he was walking down McKinson. I mean, every single round he was, but at the start of the first round I was very intrigued because McKinson actually was firing with Ortiz Jr., but obviously as the rounds were going on, like in the third round, he was just getting walked down and really beat up. Specifically, another big round where that happened was in the 5th round. And really just every single round that Ortiz Jr. won was him walking him down with effective punches coming forward. And in that 5th round, Ortiz Jr. was actually laying a big beating on McKinson. And as in a beating, I don't mean he was like wobbling around the ring or anything. He just landed so many more punches than McKinson and just really dominated the round. But then in round 6 was a pretty solid round for Vergil Ortiz Jr. He won it clear. But then round 7, I actually did give to Michael McKinson. He actually was out jabbing Vergil Ortiz Jr. Outlanded him maybe in that round. He just landed the better punches, landed some nice left hands down the pipe. It was a close round, but I edged it to McKinson. But then in the 8th round, towards the end, in the last 20 seconds, Vergil Ortiz Jr. landed a big sort of right hook / uppercut to the the right side of Michael McKinson's body, and he went down immediately to the canvas. He got back up but was running around the ring. And then in the start of the 9th round, this is where the fight ended, McKinson tried to sort of move around the ring a bit, but then Vergil Ortiz came forward, and in the first punch of that round, Vergil Ortiz Jr. landed literally the exact same punch he dropped McKinson with in round 8, and then McKinson went down again. And then when he got up, his leg looked very stiff on that side. I don't know if it was the body shot that caused that, but it could have been the body shot that basically paralyzed his right leg, because that was a brutal shot in the right spot. And it seemed like right after that shot landed, his leg looked very stiff after he got up from the second knockdown. Yes, he did get up from that knockdown in the 9th round, but then he was being chased down in the ring by Ortiz Jr., getting hit with big shots. He was running around, but at that point he was very slowly running because obviously his right leg looked like it was sort of paralyzed and very stiff, and that's what could happen to fighters if they're extremely hurt in a spot, specifically the temple, but I've never seen it with a body shot, but I guess this is definitely an example. But then McKinson's corner, mainly his father, obviously his trainer, threw in the towel. The referee waved it off. I think it was a good choice from his dad. Obviously, I don't think a father would want to be seeing their kid getting beat up like that. Specifically, I mean, he was losing the fight, didn't really have much of a chance, and even the round before, McKinson's dad did ask him if he wanted to continue, and how many rounds is left, and if he could survive them and whatnot, and he was really just sort of pondering the question. But nonetheless, a solid performance from Vergil Ortiz Jr., now 19-0, 19 knockouts. What is next for him? I actually did not know this was a WBA eliminator up until the announcer actually announced it right as the fight was happening. But, yeah, I mean, I know that Vergil Ortiz Jr. is the number 1 contender in the WBA, but I don't really think much is going to be brought of that, if I'm going to be 100% honest. The champions for the WBA are Errol Spence Jr., who's with PBC, and Amantes Senyones, who holds the regular title, who's also with PBC. So I don't really think there's going to be anything with the WBA for Vergil Ortiz Jr. But, This was also for the WBO International title, which Vergil Ortiz Jr. Does hold, and he is ranked number 1, I believe, by the WBO. And the WBO World Champion is Terrence Crawford, so maybe we could get a fight in the near future with Terrence Crawford and Vergil Ortiz Jr., but that could be within another year, year and a half, whatever. But I think really in Vergil Ortiz Jr.'s next fight, he should take on someone else instead of the top 15, get another solid win, and might get maybe a title shot against Crawford, as I mentioned earlier, something like that. But he should definitely have another big main event like this in his next fight. But as for Michael McKinson, losing here for the first time in his professional career, this is his second straight fight on a Golden Boy card. Considering he's had 2 fights in the United States, I don't know if he's going to go back to the UK and just primarily fight there, because he could definitely have some very solid fights on Golden Boy in the United States. He could take on maybe Blair Cobbs, who's coming off a solid win over Maurice Hooker. He could take on maybe Alexis Rocha, could take on just a lot of other fighters, maybe even Mean Machine, Edgedis Kaliauskas. He could take on a lot of fighters on a Golden Boy card, but I don't know if for sure he's going to stay fighting in the United States on these big cards. But if he goes back to the UK, I could see him taking on a bad fighter with a good record, get a solid win, and then just continue fighting those level guys, and he might pick up like a European championship or something like that before maybe getting another big fight somewhere at this level. So overall, Vergil Ortiz Jr. defeats Michael McKinson by knockouts in the 9th round, as Michael McKinson's corner threw in the towel, leading to the referee waving it off. And yeah, that's really it. I'm MB Boxing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.